Welcome back to my little channel. Today I once again want to talk about the United Nations. Now surely not everything they do must be bad, right? Um, Maybe. Well, at least not everyone working for the United Nations is bad. I'm 100% willing to believe that. But a lot of bad stuff happens under the watch of the United Nations. What does that mean? Well, it means that we have an institution created by the West that fails to be reliable. What do you mean fails to be reliable? I mean, the United Nations is here to stop murders and wars and the most terrible things that happen to people. Maybe. But at the same time, the United Nations is part of these problems. They cause certain problems. I mean, not too long ago I made a video about how the United Nations security forces in the areas in the Middle East are actually hindering help for Christians. Which is an interesting story, but a problematic one. And probably somewhere soon I'll make a video on Agenda 21 and the Calagri plan. I think it's called Calagri. I've got the name somewhere. I'm sorry if I'm mistaken in the name. But yeah, those are things I still most likely will address in the future. But there's something that I never understood. Now, a lot of stories people will say, well, if it's negative about the UN, it's probably a hoax or a conspiracy theory. No, okay. I'm willing to give it a chance. I'm willing to say, you know what? Maybe it is a hoax. Maybe it is a conspiracy. But what kind of stops me from believing that it is that a lot of the stuff that people say in a negative way about the United Nations is actually confirmed by papers from the United Nations. Not everything, obviously, not everything, but a lot of stuff is, and I'll come back to that in one of my other videos in the future, I'm sure. Today I wanted to talk about something more down to earth. Because UN peacekeepers went to Haiti after the environmental disaster that hit them. It was a tsunami, so I guess you can call it environmental. I don't know. Natural disaster. Let's call it a natural disaster. And they went there to help restabilize the country and help build it up. But that's not what happened. What happened is that UN peacekeepers kind of had sex with underage people. In this story, they talk about how UN peacekeepers fathered hundreds of babies with girls as young as 11. Does that mean all of the mothers of the babies were as young as 11? No, obviously not. But they were young. And if we scroll down a little bit, the United Nations peacekeepers charged with protecting disaster-struck Haiti have fathered hundreds of babies with local women and girls before leaving them behind in poverty. Okay, that sounds bad. But it's probably not true because let's pretend that this is fake news, shall we? Okay. So why is the Washington Post also telling us that this happened? Though in the Washington Post the victims aren't all negatively affected because, well, they were giving a little bit of money. But again, as young as 11, I don't understand this. How can we, as a Western world, have a concept of creating safety around the world by men who rape underage girls and leave them behind pregnant, no less? Well, it mustn't be true. The research team led by Sabine Lee, a professor of the University of Birmingham, and Susan Bartels, a clinician scientist at Queen's University in Ontario, did not directly ask the people they interviewed about sexual relationships with a peacekeeper or children born through those relations. The interviewees brought those issues up on their own, so people would tell them out of themselves. It's not that they were looking for these dirt problems. No, they were talking with people to see what's going on, and then this came above table. And it's logical that there were people looking for, the health issues of the people in Haiti. I mean, the country still is a mess after the natural disaster that hit it. But somehow, when this happens, we're not to talk about this. Surely not. Now, the report implicates that UN personnel from 13 countries are implicated in this. The most of them were from Brazil and Uruguay in this situation. Obviously, when we were talking about the Muslim thing earlier and the Christian refugees in the Middle East, the UN soldiers came from countries in the region. Obviously, the same is true when it comes to Haiti. And I can remember the story from some time ago that UN officials were implicated in sexual affairs, indeed with minors as well, in the former Yugoslavia area. And I'm not going to go on to that one. Today I'm merely going to talk about Haiti. So there are only 265 stories, apparently, of children being abandoned by their UN fathers. Here it starts with the story of a 14-year-old. And at one point it's easy to be glib about it. Oh, well, yeah, no, it happens. But these people in Haiti came to look at the UN as a force to do good. And I'm still willing to believe that most of the UN forces that went there to do good. But a large amount of them didn't. And the UN is silent about this. Oh, they mention that it happened. I'm just scrolling through the article. Links are provided downstairs. You can read it yourself. They have no problem telling the people that this happened, but they're not taking responsibility. Here we have a graph, home countries of the UN personnel implicated in the peacekeeper baby stories. 28 and 21% of the UN personnel in the 265 peacekeeper baby stories were identified, 28% and 21%, as being from Uruguay and Brazil. These represent the two largest troops of the continent. Brazil's troops contribute was consistently much larger than of Uruguay. So Brazilian UN peacekeepers behaved on average better than the Uruguayan. I don't know, sorry. People from Uruguay, if you feel offended, yeah, too bad. But the fact that it happened at all. Now don't get me wrong, I can understand that in a large operation you will have people misbehaving. Okay. So why aren't these people being dealt with? Why aren't they being arrested? Why aren't they being charged? The thing is, these rape cases happen. I can understand that the United Nations forces cannot pretend to know all their soldiers. But the thing is, these soldiers often go unscathed in the situation. They're not held responsible. They're not held accountable. Nor are the United Nations or the member states where these soldiers come from taking responsibility at all in these situations. Once again, the UN is merely there to impose their will upon the local public. And whatever damages they do, well, again, I don't think all UN soldiers are bad. I really believe that there are plenty of soldiers that go in to do good. I mean, this was true for the case in Sarajevo, in Serbia, where one of the police officers that helped the United Nations stood up against what she found, and she tried to get people punished for their, well, pedophilia, really. It nearly cost her life, but that's a different story. I'm pretty sure I should be able to find that article again. But I can't find anyone being punished for what happened to the people in Haiti. And this happened in other places the UN has been active as well. In the Congo, in, you know what, I'm not going to list a lot of names, that's bullshit. The problem is that we have an institution that the globalists are pushing upon us, because let's be honest, the UN is a globalist movement, or a globalist organization that is basically acting above the law. But they are there to protect us. It seems that, it just seems that Trump is right about the United Nations. They're not in it to help the people. They're pretending to help the people. Mind you, I still believe that there are soldiers that are coming out in active duty for the United Nations that truly want to help people. And they probably are the majority of it as well. But the United Nations as an organization itself is not out there to help the victims of whatever is going out there. They're merely there to be seen and to be paid. Anyway, this is my little video on this one. Like, share and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Criticism, as always, is more than welcome. Feel free to read what I had posted downstairs. And I like to hear what your thoughts on this concept are. Hope to see you all soon.